We're gonna guess the hosts, hey. We're gonna host the guests, hey. We're gonna rank them all to find out who's the best. Hey. We're hosting till the world stops turning, and we'll host it to the ground tonight.
It's episode 28 of Guest Host Raw, the series where I look at every episode of the guest host era of Monday Night Raw. This week's episode is certainly a landmark one for many reasons. For starters, this episode comes to us from January 4th, 2010 at the Nutter Center in Dayton, Ohio. It is the first episode of Raw of the new year. We are on the road to the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania 26. And we got to figure out, how are these esteemed, honorable guest hosts going to lead Raw down the primrose path through this, what is supposed to be the best stretch of the year for WWE? We are going to find out here. We certainly hope this episode of Guest Host Raw is the best there is, was, and ever will be, because this week's guest host is none other than Bret the Hitman Hart, back on WWE programming for the first time in 12 years, if you don't include his Hall of Fame induction 2 years before this. But it's crazy to think that he would ever return to TV, ever come back to the fold of WWE after everything that man had been through just between he and the company alone. But also, the timing of Bret coming here is very interesting, because this week's episode of Raw happens to go up against the Monday night debut of TNA Impact. That was one of the biggest things that Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff did upon coming to the company. They said, we got to compete, we got to go head to head with WWE. Gotta take it to them, brother. So they moved Impact to Monday nights. They moved it just for this one time, January 4th, and it was kind of a trial deal. And based on how it would go, it would then lead to more. And it turned out to be the most watched episode of Impact to this day, and for good reason. There was a lot of hype behind it, being the Monday night debut. How would TNA compare with what WWE was doing? And what would WWE do in response? I mean, obviously, pulling the Bret Hart card is going to be a big deal, but how much are they going to treat this episode beyond that like a big deal? Now, a few of you in the comments section have been asking me to do some kind of big comparison between the Raw and Impact going head to head. I don't want to do two parallel reviews, because that is a whole lot of time spent, and it's not going to be a who wore it better. I'm not bringing that back for this. But one thing I did in preparation for this week's episode of Raw was I also grabbed the January 4th Impact. I put them side by side on a timeline, and I put in 3-minute ad breaks where the breaks were put in, so to get a rough idea of what we were watching at that exact moment between either Raw and Impact. So you can see what exactly was competing with what. So occasionally I will chime in with what was happening on Impact at the very moment we're talking about certain aspects of Raw. So Raw's opening hype package begins with the kid yelling, "Bret!" And so it's the big flowery Bret Hart returns package, very similar to what we saw last week when Vince McMahon presented it on Raw. And it also does that kind of like tonal shift into what happened at Montreal and the screw job and everything. And then we get a recap of last week where Vince and Shawn were talking, and HBK told Vince to bring Bret back for this week. So meanwhile, on the other channel, as the Amazing Red is making his way out for the Steel Asylum match, which is quite a humdinger in and of itself, Justin Roberts introduces the Hall of Famer Bret the Hitman Hart, and we hear that guitar squeal, and then it goes into this like new version of the Bret Hart theme. I'm like, they changed his theme. Why'd they tweak his theme? That's bullshit. Like, there's nothing wrong with the da-da-da-da theme that he had for all those years. They used it for his hype packages and whatnot. And now he comes here and it's like somebody did a cover of it. And I did not like that. No, sir. I mean, if you want people to tune away to see what's going on in Impact, you play him a shitty version of Bret Hart's theme in this comeback. But man, that pop for Bret when he came out, and like you see him in the leather jacket, his best jean shorts and the sunglasses, hands in his pockets, looking around, taking it all in. Now, I watched this live as it happened. I, back then, would flip back and forth between Raw and Impact to see what was going on. But I didn't want to miss this. And even then, and even now watching that, I got a little choked up looking at it. Because thinking about everything Bret Hart had been through from that point, from leaving the WWF, all the injuries and the loss of family members and the stroke and all this other stuff to happen to him in the years since then, and kind of beginning with the departure and now coming back here full circle. That was really cool to see. And the first line from commentary in all this is Jerry Lawler breaking the silence going, "Oh my God," because what else can you say to a moment like that? So Bret's in the ring, and the first thing he says is, "Well, I guess hell's frozen over." And he goes, "You're probably wondering why I'm here, 12 years later." He says, "Over the last few years, I'd always wanted to come back to the WWE," kind of like he says the WCW, the WWE, but Vince McMahon, he never made that possible. But I'm like, that's an interesting retelling of the story, that Bret always wanted to come back, but it was Vince who made it an issue. So he says he has taken this chance to say thank you to all of his fans. Thank you for keeping me in your hearts for all these years, all the time I've been gone from the WWE. He brings up the fact that it was in this building, back in '93, where he won his very first King of the Ring, gets a nice pop. And then he says, "If I remember correctly, Jerry Lawler jumped me afterward." And he says, "Something's never changed." He looks over at Lawler, who's kind of looking up at him with this almost like fiendish grin as he's kind of looking up from his monitor up at Bret from the ring on "Hi, Hitman." Like, ooh, bit of a little ripple of what once was all those years ago is kind of neat to see. So first things first, he wants to bring out Shawn Michaels. And so we hear HBK's music, and out he comes. We haven't seen these two share a ring or share space together since Survivor Series 1997. This is a big deal. They're face to face in the ring. Well, at this very moment, Jeff Hardy has just returned to the Impact Zone and is sitting atop the Steel Asylum. So he says, "Shawn, I have come here because I want to have a truce. I want to bury the hatchet with you, and I want to call everything off. Just put all this behind us. Put it all in the past." And so Shawn thinks about it, and he goes, "First of all, Hitman, before you get your closure, there's something that I've been waiting 12 years to say to you." And then all of a sudden we hear this one fan just yell out, "Ask him if he's Shawn." Like, what? And I played it back so often to try to figure out what this dude was rambling about. So Shawn tells Bret that he deserved what happened to him at Survivor Series, and he does admit he played a part in what happened in Montreal, and there's a part of him that does not regret a bit of it, as the fans, some of them, chant "You screwed Bret" at him. And I love that Bret just goes, "I rest my case." Like, what? What was your case? And so Shawn then goes, "There's a part of me that doesn't regret it, but there is another part of me that's had to live with that for the last 12 years. And Bret, I always respected you. I never thought you respected me, and that there were times where I couldn't stand the sight of you. But when I think of Bret Hart, I think about Anaheim, California, and our 60-minute Iron Man match, where nobody thought we could do it, nobody thought we should do it, let alone on pay-per-view, but we did, and we redefined the industry." He goes, "When I think of Bret Hart, I think of the excellence of execution, and you're not the only one who's carried this around for 12 years. So before we bury the hatchet, I have to ask, do you really want to do this? Are you ready?" And Bret goes, "Well, you weren't the easiest guy to love back then either, but, our careers shouldn't be tagged by what happened at Survivor Series, because you had a great career, I had a great career. I think we should take this opportunity right now, just to put it behind us and begin this next chapter in friendship," or whatever. And so Bret puts his hand out, they shake, and Shawn starts to walk away. I can hear one fan just yell, "Sharpshooter him!" And so Shawn stands there for a second, he turns around, and then he hugs him. Oh, what a cool moment that was. And so the music plays, Shawn plays him off as Shawn goes to leave, and then Bret goes, "But I'm not done here tonight, folks. I want to call out Vince McMahon, because there's some stuff I want to say to him too." And so we get the pop for that. Oh my God, Vince McMahon. But he does not show. He does not appear on the stage. And then it just kind of ends on that kind of awkward note where it's like, well, I want somebody to come out, but they're not. So bye, we're going to play some graphics now. But man, that is such a cool, just opening segment. I mean, how can you match that kind of what you're witnessing of history? You know, Bret coming back after all that time, him burying the hatchet publicly with Shawn Michaels is such a good moment. It is that closure. It really puts just like that closing moment on the scandal of the Montreal Screwjob after everyone, litigated it and went over it and toiled over it for 12 years. To have that moment there was really cool. It was a big moment. This shit meant something to me. Then after the break, we see Josh Matthews sitting outside Mr. McMahon's office. Vince comes into the shot from the outside. Turns out he was in a meeting while all this is going on. So when Josh asks him for comment about what Bret Hart did, calling him out, Vince says, I didn't hear any of that. I was in a meeting and, nobody calls me out. But if Bret wants to find me in a public forum, then I'll call him out. It'll be on my terms later tonight. And so then he leaves and Josh looks at the camera and goes, all right, let's take it back to you at ringside. Like, whoa, that was kind of weird. How often do you ever hear the backstage interviewers ever just toss back to ringside? That feels like they got rid of that eons ago, even back then. Then we see Cole and Lawler, they welcome the fans, and they update us saying that the Divas champion Melina suffered an injury at a live event over the weekend, had to vacate the belt because she's going to be out for months, which really sucks for her, and now the belt is going to be, the new champion will be decided in a tournament which begins thusly. But yeah, that's really unfortunate for Melina to get hurt there. It was also just the storylines that she was working with were also pretty unfortunate. I mean, the feud with Maryse was the path it had been going on felt so lackluster, and then to have this injury on top of it, now it doesn't even have a decent ending. So as Mick Foley can't get into the Impact Zone and Bobby Lashley and Crystal Marshall appear in the six-sided ring over on Raw, we go to our first match in the Divas title tournament, Maryse taking on Brie Bella. And as Maryse makes her entrance, Jerry Lawler says, every time I see Maryse, I just go, way to go, God. I'm glad that, Jerry's belief system is only predicated on the fact that beautiful women exist. After the match begins, Maryse just decides to do her rope taunt again for some reason, and then we get some kind of clunky offense. It does start to smooth out, and then on the outside, Nikki Bella does this cheap shot and throws Maryse into the announce table. I'm like, well, hold on a minute, which one is the heel in this? And then to make it even more confusing, at one point, they try to do twin magic right in front of Maryse. Like, she sees them clear as day doing it. Like, what are these two, fucking stupid? So she just kicks Nikki, who's now in the ring, kicks her in the ribs, hits her with the French kiss DDT, and wins. Wow, you sure made the Bellas look really stupid. That's amazing. But then as Maryse makes her way up the ramp, The Miz shows up. The US champion basically accosts Maryse and says, if you win this tournament, I might call you back. And then he speaks a little French saying, Je suis que tu me veux. And then he follows up by saying, you said earlier that 2010 was going to be the year of Maryse. Well, I've got news for you. This is going to be the year, the decade, every moment going forward will belong to me, because catchphrase. Well, this is a very interesting, moment of a heel, healing on another heel. To what end? The on-camera discussions and on-camera sharing of Miz and Maryse at this point in their IRL relationship is very early here. But to see that the way they play it out on TV is so confusing. Are they together? Are they not on air? Because it seems at this point they're very antagonistic to each other. So The Miz is going to be on commentary for our next matchup, which, who the fuck gives a shit? Because honestly, right now, Hulk Hogan is about to address the Impact Zone. Who cares what Raw's doing at this point? But it is going to be a matchup to determine the new #1 contender for the US title. And it starts out with MVP and Jack Swagger having intros, and I'm like, no, I don't want to see these two fight each other anymore. Oh, but thank God, it's actually going to be a four-way, because after the break, we find out it's got Carlito in it as well, and Mark Henry, the man, but he's nowhere to be found. He is not there for the first 2 minutes of this part of the match after the break, because guess what? He was outside and he was rammed into the ring post and knocked out. Mark, you gotta stop going out there. It's clearly your biggest weakness. I thought it was funny when The Miz name dropped Spencer Pratt as a good friend of his. Like, oh, we go back on our TiVo and watch old Raws, and you can't believe how big Mark Henry is. At one point, Mark dumps MVP out of the ring, and they're like, former tag team partners. Like, whoa, since when had they been former partners? Like, when did that breakup ever happen? But I'm looking at Mark Henry's singlet. He doesn't have the big letter patches on his back anymore. He's his own The Man now. Then Mark puts Jack on his shoulders like a fireman's carry, and then starts to kind of jump around with him like he's doing a torture rack, but that's not how it works. He just stands there for the longest time with Jack on his shoulders doing nothing until MVP just kicks Mark, and then everyone falls down. Carlito's thrown out of the ring. Jack Swagger takes the worst move ever, the Playmaker, for MVP to win, and so he is the new #1 contender. It was a fine little TV match. I just thought it was so funny how you just couldn't see one of the participants for most of what you saw on air. Before the break, we see Jerishow having a chat backstage, and the Big Show's like, this is our last chance. I don't want you to leave Raw. This had better work. And Jericho's like, this is gonna work, trust me. And so Jericho walks down the hall toward Bret Hart's office, and we come back from commercial, and Bret is in the Bret zone, and he's talking with some random guy who's just gushing. It's like, oh man, I sure loved you WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match. There were other matches besides the Iron Man match and, Survivor Series 97 that you can draw from when talking about Bret, guys. Then in walks Chris Jericho, and Jericho tries to appeal to Bret, saying, we have so much history together. I was expecting them to talk about their time in WCW, but obviously they're not going to do that. But he was like, I used to train in the dungeon, and your brother Keith, he would stretch people and he would scare all the cats and all that stuff. And, he's trying to reminisce and be all buddy-buddy. And Bret, just classic stone-faced Bret, as Jericho, again, trying to appeal to him, saying, I know that deep down you really hate Shawn Michaels still, so how about you become the guest referee for our tag title match, and you let instinct kick in and you screw Shawn Michaels the way that he screwed you in Montreal. Bret's like, I'm not a hypocrite, Chris, I want peace. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to screw Shawn Michaels. And and Chris is just like, he doesn't understand it. You really, this is all an act, right? You still really hate Shawn, don't you? So Bret talks him down, says, you got to win this match on your own. Oh, and by the way, it was actually you who screamed louder than anyone in the dungeon, and you were the one who scared the cats at the upper part of the house. So you live with that. Ooh, burned him. And so Jericho leaves kind of dejected. And then Bret kind of looks off and then just looks right into the camera's lens. And because no one does that. It's a weird moment. What do you do? He looks away for a second. He's like, does a little shrug there. I wish we saw Bret Hart do more things on this show. Obviously his segments that he was in were crucial, but I feel like we should have seen more of Bret as more than just a guest and be more of a host. And we know that Bret has experience in a matchmaking capacity because, hey, he was the one-time commissioner of World Wrestling All-Stars. We then go backstage to see Hornswoggle and Triple H showing off this new line of Mattel WWE action figures, and they're pointing all of them out, and Triple H is like, if you help us win, I'll give you one of them as a treat, coochie coo. And then Shawn Michaels walks in, and again, I love that Shawn is the voice of reason and just rationality and all this. Why do you talk to him like he is a child? He's got a beard. So they're talking more about this unified tag title match. They got to focus on this. And so Triple H says, I got it all figured out. While you were in there making up with Bret, I was thinking about the tag title match. So here's what I got planned. And he just calls out for Chris Jericho to show up. In comes Santino Marella wearing a suit and a wig, saying his version of some big highfalutin words like Jericho would say. So Triple H has trained Swoggle to attack Jericho, like a dog. So sure enough, he's jumping, lunging after Jericho, or Santino, I should say. And they're doing this whole cartoon fight on the couch where Santino's trying to scrape over, getting pulled back. The wig is flying, shoes flying in the air as DX are just doing their chatting in the foreground. Finally, Hornswoggle comes out and he gets a cookie and he walks away. And Santino gets up and says, good luck with the sucking, which is an amazing way to close out that segment. But yeah, again, the question of what is Hornswoggle, does it really matter at this point? They don't seem to care or know what Hornswoggle is. It's whatever the plot requires, honestly. Same thing with whatever Santino is any given week. Well, how's this for a fun coincidence? Impact and Raw were running tag title matches roughly at the same time, because over on Impact, they had the Knockouts tag title match happening. Over at the same time, we were getting the entrances for the Unified Tag Team title match as DX defended against Jerishow once more with feeling. And this time, if Jerishow lose, then Chris Jericho is off of Raw. He's gone forever and back on SmackDown, never to show up on Raw ever again. Remember that now. So this match plays out fairly much like everything else they've done. Jericho's getting his heat, and he's starting to do it. The Hogan Ear Cup, I will always remember this. When I watched it live, I couldn't believe the hubris of Jericho to be doing the Hogan Ear thing. Direct shot to him and to TNA and whatnot. But over on Impact, just as he's doing the Ear Cup thing, Sean Morley barges in on the beautiful people's game of strip poker. TNA, TNA. We have this interaction with the Big Show and Shawn, and the way that Shawn has to keep bouncing off the ropes just to chop down the big redwood tree in Big Show was very fun to see. Hornswoggle comes in and out of the ring at one point, does a little big sit onto the show as the referee is distracted. We get some finisher exchanges. We see chokeslam. We see some pedigrees. We see one pedigree with Shawn also pushing the Big Show down just for the extra oomph. Swoggle comes back in the ring at one point and starts to tune up the band, and he's running toward the ring, and Jericho just like, boom, kicks him right in the head. It was the craziest looking like kick and bump. He puts Triple H on the walls of Jericho, but as soon as he steps into it, Shawn hits him with Sweet Chin Music. The cover, DX win, and retain the tag gold in a pretty good match, all told. And then after the bell and after the music plays, Triple H on the mic and tells Chris, "That's it, Chris, you're done. You've got to leave Raw now. Bye-bye." And then the fans, like, I don't know, there's no coordination here. The audience does like the weakest, wishy-washiest, nah, hey, goodbye sing-along I've ever heard. Probably because they know, like, why are we going to invest in singing this song? He's going to come back next fucking week. But then the segment ended kind of on a weird note, because you get this really long, like, static shot of up the ramp from the bottom up to Jericho, this long walk of shame up the ramp, looking around, leaving, looking all sad. And, like, the way it was framed, I was expecting something wacky to happen as an exclamation point, like, oh, the pyro goes off in him, or an anvil fucking falls from the sky. But no, he just looks sad, and he walks off, and that was it. Okay, we'll see you next week, buddy. Then we see outside Mr. McMahon's office, somebody is knocking at the door. McMahon looks up and says, "What the hell are you doing here? You got some nerve showing up." And we see it's Randy Orton, who is coming to Vince with a proposal. He wants to work together with Vince. And Vince says, you know, after everything Bret did to me, spitting in my face and walking out in the company, that's nothing compared to what you did to me and my family. And Orton very rightly points out, well, yeah, but you've done business with tons of people like that who've pissed you off and screwed you over. So he's like, Bret Hart's the one legend I've not been able to put to rest. And I think I can help you with that. And he's like, basically, I want to punt him in the head. And Vince is like, well, what's in it for you? And Orton goes, how about I kick Bret in the head and you put me number 30 in the Royal Rumble match? Ding, 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 finally! Somebody mentioned the Rumble's happening, y'all. We finally know that's the next pay-per-view. Wow. So Vince says, I already have my own security at my beck and call. Don't confront me like this ever again. So Orton leaves looking pretty dejected, and then he comes upon his so-called boys, Cody and Ted, of Legacy. And they're like, hey, you know, we wanted to thank you for inspiring us so much last week in our matches, so we're going to do the same thing for you in your match. And we want to help inspire you in your match with Kofi Kingston, because if you lose this matchup, you know, the same thing that you threatened us, we're going to threaten you. We're going to kick you out of the Legacy, and we're going to beat you up. Like, come on, guys. You know that's not going to happen. And ooh, like, it's fun to say there's stakes involved with this, but like, come on, guys. Like, you know this is not going to happen. We already are tempering our expectations with Jericho. Don't threaten us with a good time, and don't tempt us and lie and say, "Ooh, the legacy could break up tonight." After the break, they show a recap of the John Cena-Sheamus feud thus far, and over on Impact, just as Hulk Hogan is showing up on the big screen to publicly castrate Jeff Jarrett, over on Raw, we hear from the WWE Champion Sheamus, who is in the ring, cutting a promo, and he's gloating over what happened last week. John Cena can make all the excuses he wants, but I still did what I said I was going to do and end the year standing tall, still the champion. He says, "My next title match is at the Royal Rumble, but it will not be against John Cena because it's been there, done that. And Bret Hart may be the best there ever was, but I've got best there ever is and will be sewn up because that's me, the WWE champion." And he wants to make a challenge to anyone, dares anyone to step in the ring with him. Suddenly out comes Evan Brunn. The high flyer comes out to the ring. He gets in there and just stares him down, yoinks the mic out of his hand, and slides out of the ring. I thought that was really funny. So he says, "The only reason you have that title is because somebody gave you that opportunity. If you gave me the same opportunity, I know I can beat you for the championship." Very noble thing for plucky young Evan to say. And he tosses the microphone back in the ring, and Sheamus one-handed catches it. So smooth. Can you imagine if he fumbled that? He'd be like, "Push, done. We got to drop the belt to Evan Bourne right the fuck now." And he goes, "Well, little Evan Bourne, why don't we get a referee out here and find out for ourselves? If you beat me here tonight, I will gladly give you a title match at the Royal Rumble. But all you're going to get is the beating of your life, little Evan Bourne." And that's basically what happens. The match begins, and Bourne is full of fast fury at the beginning here. He even hits Sheamus with the shooting star press within the first 60 seconds, but Sheamus shrugs that off. He catches another flying move, and it's just academic from there. We get the brogue kick, we get the Celtic cross, and easy pickings for the champion here. And I don't know, this segment was weird because how does this make the champion look strong? What does Evan Bourne get out of this necessarily? How are they going to follow up on that for him next week? Okay, it's a body to make Sheamus look good, but I don't know, it just feels like this is kind of a nothing segment for Sheamus here. By the way, while all that was happening, Bubba the Love Sponge had just let the Nasty Boys into the Impact Zone. And then we get a graphic hyping up the McMahon-Bret confrontation. I'm glad they made them the same size this week. Then they do a little tribute to Dr. Death Steve Williams, who had recently passed away due to throat cancer. By the way, if you want to see a little-known highlight in Dr. Death's career from the early 90s, I just did a review of UWF's Beach Brawl, where he took on Bam Bam Bigelow for the Sports Channel TV Championship. So go check that one out. We come back from break and they replay the Bret package from the top of the show. The same flowery part at the beginning. Why are they doing all the same shit again? And then they go to the Montreal chapter, and this time it's actually edited a little bit differently. Now we are getting sound bites from the Bret Hart DVD documentary about it, and we get a bite from Vince on it, which is a different take on it. I thought that was really interesting, kind of getting this alternate angle of the screw job after what Vince's side of it was. I just don't understand why they had to include that whole first part of it as well. Feels like they're padding for time. Well, over on Impact, Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles for the TNA title has just begun. It's their main event for the week. And meanwhile, over on Raw, we get our last match of the night as Kofi Kingston takes on Randy Orton one more time. And the added stakes of legacy sitting at ringside, Cody and Ted watching this matchup with the threat of expulsion looming over Randy's head should he lose. There's a line of commentary from Michael Cole in the intros where he's like, "Kofi Kingston arrived in 2009. Will he keep the same momentum in 2010? And I'm like, I'm just dreading what's coming ahead for Kofi Kingston. The match begins, and both men are actually very aggressive from the onset. One of my favorite little details is early on there's a shot of Cody and Ted watching, and they're both looking, and then they both just do this kind of lean at the same time. And I just thought it was amazing. The same animation played for them. Coming back from the break, chinlock time, baby. Orton is wearing down Kofi for several minutes. They show a replay from the break where he was flung off the top turnbuckle into the barricade. So Orton's just wearing him down, wearing him down. We get a double crossbody attempt leading to a double down, and that allows Kofi just to go to the races, hitting all kinds of signature moves, but Orton just keeps kicking out of all the big stuff. Orton goes for the RKO. Kofi blocks it, goes for Trouble in Paradise. Orton blocks that, hits another RKO, and this time it actually connects. Rough looking landing for Kofi on that one, but that's all she wrote. Orton wins this competitive matchup. Great TV match, great TV main event, as Orton wins and Ted and Cody look kind of stoic and kind of looking like, we may have stepped in this one. It was a fine match, nothing we hadn't seen before, but they just telegraphed that whole risk of Orton getting kicked out of the group way too much for it to be plausible or believable that it was actually going to happen on this show. This is not the stupid match. I thought this was going to be it, because Google tells me January 2010, but it's not this match. But we're getting close. So after the break, we go to our final segment of the evening for Raw. Mr. McMahon calls out Bret Hart. So Vince is in the ring, and first of all, he says Happy New Year to all the fans. And he says, there's no reason for me to call out Bret tonight because, we saw earlier with Bret and Shawn settling their differences, putting Montreal behind them. And you know what? I feel the same way. As far as I'm concerned, the Montreal incident is basically over. Those were his words. Basically over, which I like that. It's like, well, we can still kind of pull that as a reference anytime we want to, but it's basically over. He continues, nonetheless, I want to thank Bret Hart for being a great guest host. And speaking of guest hosts, next week you're in for a treat because the guest host is going to be Iron Mike Tyson, which gets booed, which kind of surprised me. Maybe the fans were just upset that Tyson wasn't going to be there for them. I don't know. But as he talks more about that, suddenly Bret makes his way out to the stage. No music, no lights or nothing. He just comes out. His sunglasses are down. He's just walking to the ring to confront Vince. He's got nowhere to go. And so he takes the jacket off, and Vince is like, I see that look in your eye. I think I know what you want to do, and I think I know what these people want you to do. They want to see you put me in the sharpshooter. And the fan's like, yes. But he's like, before you do anything, you got to say your things, and now I'm going to get the chance to say what I want. I want to get the things off of my chest. And literally, as he's saying this, that's when over on Impact, Mick Foley is getting beaten up by Scott Hall and Sean Waltman and Kevin Nash. Hulk Hogan looks, kind of concerned as they go off the air. And we are in overrun time, baby. So Vince tries to preface it by saying he's not trying to provoke Bret, but he says, I do believe that you screwed you. And he says, I'll never forget how you spit in my face, how you sucker punched me in the back afterward. I'll never forget how you disrespected me at the Hall of Fame ceremony. And you've slandered and you've trashed my name in the media for years, And he says, I'm not trying to provoke you, but the next thing I want to hear you say, the first two words out of your mouth should be, I'm sorry. And then Bret goes, well, I have two words for you as well, but they're going to be a lot different than the two words you want me to say, which got a great reaction. He says he came here to find closure for this whole thing, and he's halfway there with Shawn, and now he wants to wrap things up with Vince. And he says, you want this as badly as I do. And Vince, he says first, when I first came out to see you, first thing I wanted to do was kick you in the guts, which is like, what a weird, specific thing to say. I want to kick you in the guts. No one says that. Is that some old-timey thing? Because you couldn't say nuts back then? It's the same thing as suffer and succotash. I'm going to kick you in the guts. Because, who says that? You want to kick somebody in the nuts. That just flows off way better than to kick you in the guts. But then he says, in the interest of being honest, I do also want this as badly as you do, Bret. And he reminisces about WrestleMania 2. Bret's first Mania in the Battle Royal with Andre the Giant. And he says, as great as Andre was, I knew then that I would be looking at the past with him. But I was looking at you, and I was looking at the future. And you went from being a tag team specialist to being the WWE champion. And I didn't hand any of these opportunities to you. You fought and clawed and scratched and kicked and bit your way to the top. And you did it all on your own. And The fans are resonating with this, and he's really doing the flowery prose for Bret, putting over just how hard of a worker he was, how good of a champion he was. Thank you for all you did for this company. He's also saying, I'm also going to induct your father, Stu Hart, into the WWE Hall of Fame. And he thanks Stu, he thanks Bret, and he says, you know, you are the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. And he has this nice smile. It's like, aw, this is so nice. It's so sweet of him. Like, this is very unlike Vince to do that, you know? But like, you know, you get to see the comments here. You get the idea, the sense this is what Vince really believes and what Bret really believes. And so, you know, they shake hands, the music plays, Bret's and Vince doing the arms thing, they're doing all the different sides, like that's kind of how you know some shit's gonna go down. And then Vince has Bret do the arms thing, I don't know what you call this, but he has him do the arms thing, and Bret does the arms thing, and then Vince just kicks him, bam, right in the guts. And I thought for years that like, when they said on commentary, he kicked Bret Hart in the guts, I thought that was just a really shitty euphemism for kicking him in the balls, because it looks like that's what he did at first. But then when you watch this back, like, oh no, it's actually a pretty high kick. He did like get him in the lower abdomen. Like, I would not call that Dick Kick City anymore. So he did kick him in the guts. But again, the frequency which they said that and the emphasis on it is very, very weird about that. But anyway, Vince just kind of like glares at Bret as he leaves the ring and goes up the ramp, and Bret's like wincing in pain. He slowly gets up and kind of shakes his head as we go off the air. Man, looks like we got our WrestleMania storyline, baby. You know, before Bret came back to WWE, I never could have anticipated what a return for him would look like. But knowing that he was in no condition to wrestle, like they would never have cleared him to wrestle a proper match. So it seems like, what can you do with Bret and Shawn at this point? There's nothing more to explore with that. Like, they seem ready to move on in so many different ways, but there's still so much more meat on the bone with the wanted catharsis for Bret to go after Vince, because I think everyone understands after all this time that Vince is the problem, you know, in this story. He is the evil Machiavellian mastermind and whatnot, so it's easier for him to, you know, for Bret to work him on so many levels. But after the end of that episode, both watching it in 2010 and then like watching it again now, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I am ready for this storyline. I hope we get some like real life, like, you know, drama coming out of here as far as like what fuels this storyline going forward. Because, you know, again, blending the real life with the kayfabe can make for some really interesting stuff. And they have the opportunity to do some really interesting things with this particular storyline that fans have wanted closure on for so long. That said, I'm going to give this episode of Raw a 2.5 out of 5. Impact did their damnedest. They really swung for the fences on this first Monday night, you know, show against Raw. I don't think that episode was great, but it's not because Raw was much better. Let's be honest. This show had a really strong beginning with Bret, really strong ending with Bret, really weak in the middle. Like, you know, the balance of wrestling and not wrestling was actually really good on this show. I think there was a fine balance of matches and promos and whatever, but the matches we saw were so uneventful and so uninteresting for the most part. I feel like they knowingly booked a really boring show because they knew they could. Because they knew they weren't going to lose the ratings war to TNA here. And all they had to do to get a majority of the fans to watch them was to dangle Bret Hart to come out. And like, they could have literally fallen asleep for the rest of it. And they practically did. But everything they did at the beginning and the end was great. Now, as far as Bret Hart goes, he is the best there is, was, and ever will be in wrestling. But as far as a guest host, I wouldn't put him that far. I'm going to give him 2 out of 5 because, you know, he had a couple of amazing in-ring segments with Shawn and Vince, and driving along that WrestleMania storyline was great. But did he do any actual hosting? Did he actually make any matches or any kind of announcements? No, he was pretty much just doing his own thing. You know, again, awesome to see him back, excited for what he will do with this storyline going into WrestleMania, but yeah, not much of a host. Didn't flex his muscle, didn't get to exercise any of his duties at all. And as far as where the Hitman sits on the all-time guest host rankings 28 weeks in, I'm going to put him somewhere in the middle, just below Batista at number 16. Again, great guest appearance, just in storyline mode, great to see Bret Hart there. But boy, as an admin, he just was asleep at the wheel, is all I'm going to say. But what did you think of this episode of Raw? And hey, what did you think about the episode of Impact that took place alongside it? Which episode did you think was better? What did you think of Bret Hart burying the hatchet with Shawn Michaels? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to Wrestling with Regret. Hit the bell icon to get all the notifications. Next time here on Guest Host Raw, it's Iron Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet. One-time hero of WrestleMania 14, coming back to Guest Host Raw. And yes, Chris Jericho is definitely going to be back. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time. Go for it!